to another evening in the Stormcave, where stories live and breathe, and where family memories centered around sharing those stories together are cherished. I'm your host, Grant Walker, and I'm here with my co-host, Jenelle Schmidt. Janelle, how you doing?
I'm doing really well today. How are you?
Doing good, doing good.
Good.
We have a fun topic to talk about today, one that I think, one, hopefully is entertaining, but also hopefully would be very helpful. I would imagine there's a lot of people out there in the world in a similar boat who love stories and love to find stories and read stories and listen to music and watch movies, who also have stories of their own that they want to share with the world. And specifically, we want to talk about written stories and what it takes to write a story and then put it out into the world. And there's a lot more, well, maybe it's not a lot of options, but there's a lot more leeway in the world we live in today to take your stories and get them out there. You don't necessarily have to wait for permission. There's other routes that you can take. And so that's what we want to talk about a little bit today. Janelle is our resident expert in the world of both writing stories and getting those stories published. So we want to talk to you, Janelle, a little bit about your writing process, and what it looks like to go the self-publishing route. You've written a number of works. I want to discuss that a little bit. But before we dive in, I do want to give a quick shout out. The last episode that we did that came out last week, if this video is released this week, was our talk about movies that we consider to be perfect. And we actually got some comments and had some folks sharing some of their favorites with us, which is exactly what we want. And so I just want to take a chance to shout out some of the folks that left comments. We may know who these folks are, but I'm just going based off of their YouTube handles. And so maybe I know who you are, but I can't tell based off the names. But we got some comments from JRAD57. And this was really fun because she mentioned your film that you talked about, Arsenic and Old Lace, being one of theirs favorites. And they also talked about The Emperor's New Groove, which is a movie that we have talked about in the past that I would also agree falls into that perfect movie, very unique and quirky.
Yes.
But one of the fun things about the comment here was it did exactly what we're looking for, in that it introduced me to something that I had never come across my path before, which is kind of surprising actually, but instantly became one of my favorite things of all time. They were talking about, a couple episodes ago, we were talking about music and my theory that all homeschoolers have a little bit of heavy metal in their souls. And so they had maybe been introduced to the Sabaton train. And they mentioned that they had really come to enjoy, I think there's an album called A Symphony to End All Wars, which is a number of Sabaton songs performed by a symphony. And I had never seen this or come across it. And so I was like, oh, interesting. So I went and found the album on YouTube and started listening to it. And there's two songs that I must have listened to 12 times that first night. It's fantastic. It takes Sabaton music and makes it sound like a soundtrack, which, if you know me, only takes something that I already thought was awesome and makes it that much awesomer. I'm not sure that that's a word. But anyways, thank you very much to JRAD57. They also mentioned the movie Harvey, which Mom and Dad have talked about. It's with Jimmy Stewart.
Yeah.
And I think they just watched it recently. And I have never seen that movie, so I might have to add it to my list. So anyways, that was a lot of fun. Also got a comment from a Rory Pond 1701. And they mentioned Field of Dreams and Edward Scissorhands as being some of their favorite movies. And I'll have to add that to my list because I love Field of Dreams. And what's funny is there's a lot of famous quotes from that movie. Do you want to know what my favorite quote from the movie Field of Dreams is?
I think I can guess, but go ahead.
It's when James Earl Jones says, "I'm going to beat you with this crowbar until you go away."
Yes.
I'm
always quoting "Watch out for in your ear."
Yes. Oh, yes. I love that. I love that movie, and I love everything about it. It's a fantastic movie. I haven't seen that one in years. I have never seen Edward Scissorhands. In fact, I think I was having a conversation with Mom about this one recently. I think she has seen this one. And I've only ever seen the cover of it. So the fact that Field of Dreams and Edward Scissorhands are the two movies that Rory Pond 1701 mentioned, it seems like there's a broad spectrum there, but I could be wrong. Anyways, I'll have to go check that one out. And they also mentioned some of the Pixar movies, and I would agree with their comment that the early Pixar movies, it was hard to find any flaw with them. And absolutely remember seeing Up in theaters and have never probably been so emotionally impacted by the first 5 minutes of a movie that I've ever seen, I don't think.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the movie, just phenomenal and
I
incredible.
Ripped this right out of a library book.
Yes. So good. So good. And then The Incredibles, which is probably my favorite Pixar movie of all time. Again, I think that movie is perfect.
Yeah.
Then we also had a comment from I'm going to butcher this name, so forgive me that I get it wrong. I'm just going to assume that you're French, and I'm going to say that your name is J. Dubai 21. And they left a comment talking about Back to the Future, which one of my favorite movies. I haven't seen it in years and have been waiting to watch that with my kids. I remember loving those movies, but I also remember thinking, ooh, I think they're a little rough off the bat. So that I've kind of been waiting, but Wyatt actually just this morning to get the Lego magazine, which you want to talk about a dangerous thing to receive in your home. We get the Lego magazine and they saw the Back to the Future car. And so they were interested in talking about that. You mentioned Jurassic Park, which agreed 10 of 10. That's a perfect movie. They also mentioned Who Framed Roger Rabbit, another movie that I have never seen. And in my mind, I think I have an idea of what it's about, but honestly, I have no idea. So might have to add that to my list.
Is that the one with Robert Redford?
Robert Redford? I don't know.
I saw that movie in theater when I was really little, and our parents were like, "Wow, we should not have taken our child to see that movie." But that's all I remember about it.
Okay. Well, like I said, since it was mentioned with Jurassic Park and Back to the Future, I'm going to add it to the list at some point and take a look. Anyways, really wanted to shout you guys out because it is genuinely one of our hopes and purposes and goals for this show is to share some of our favorite things with you, but also to hear some of your guys' favorite things, because we're always looking for things that we haven't discovered. And like I said, even just this week, based on that one comment, I found a new album that I absolutely love. If you want to listen to the songs Dreadnought and Soldier of Heaven and Race to the Sea in symphonic form, pure cinema in an audio file. Anyways, all that to say, thank you guys so much for taking the time to leave a comment and communicate with us. That was a lot of fun. All right, moving on. I would like to get into the topic of what it takes to have a story that you have put the time and the heart and the effort and the blood, sweat, and tears into putting together in written form, writing out a story, which in itself is something that I would love to talk about. And we might touch on some of that here because I think you can't really separate the two. But how do you take that and deliver it to an audience? And obviously, the way that most people think that is done is through publishing. And there's traditional publishing and there's independent or self-publishing. Now, are there other forms of publishing, or are we just mostly looking at those two when we're talking about putting your work out there in written form?
Those are the two main ways. There are some authors who consider themselves hybrid publishers, where they have some books with a traditional publisher and some books that they've indie published. Those are pretty much the only ways to do it. There is such a thing as vanity publishing, which I do not recommend, and it's a big scam. So if anybody says, "Hey, if you pay us, we'll publish your book," run away.
Are they right up there with the Nigerian princes?
Exactly.
Okay, right on. Fool me once. Okay, so I would like to talk about, and Jenelle, you are a great person to talk about this subject because you have gone through this process a number of times. And I would imagine that your process over the years looks a little different on the most recent book that you're publishing, which is book 5 in the Turrim Archive.
Yeah, Towers of Might and Memory.
Towers of Might and Memory. Cannot wait. Versus the first book or first work you ever had published. Now, was The King's Warrior the first book you ever had published?
Yes.
It was.
Yes.
Okay. So King's Warrior published, what year was that? Do you remember?
The 2012 would have been when so it's kind of a funny story because I did technically self-publish King's Warrior originally under the title The Dragon's Eye with a totally different cover when I was in college. And then I regretted that. So I went back and did it more professionally the second time around. But yeah, 2012 is when I start counting like actual, like decided this is going to be a thing that I do.
Some years in the future, any of you folks out there that have that original copy of The Dragon's Eye, as rough around the edges as you may think it is, Jenelle, that will probably be worth billions.
Well, that would be great.
Yes, but it is out there, and there's folks that have it, and I think that's kind of cool to think that there's a first iteration out there. But can you go ahead and just I want to dive into some specifics, but starting with that book versus now, can you walk through? You finished writing your manuscript, as it were. What is the process in the self-publishing world? And well, before we even get there, why go the self-publishing route? What was the decision-making process? Obviously, there's lots of reasons, and each person probably has their own reasons for why they do it. But tell me a little bit of that story.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I finished writing King's Warrior in 2001, and I didn't actually publish it for what I consider to be, okay, I published this and had a release and actually tried to sell it until 2012. So that was a 12-year gap. In the middle of all of that, I was finishing college, getting married, moving across the country. And so there's some reason for, hopefully some good reasons there for why it took so long. But also, so I decided in like 2010, I think we had a conversation about, Stormcave and getting it started and publishing my books. And I went and dove deep into research how to get a traditional publisher. And I did everything. I started writing query letters. I started researching agents and publishers. And I spent about a year doing that. And I discovered in that year that I despise writing query letters and researching agents and trying to figure out, like, okay, even if this person calls me back, do I like all of the other titles that they've published? Do I actually want my name sitting there in that group of books? Do I really want to be represented by this person? And all of the research and all of the query letter writing. And I in that time had Leanna, so we had our first baby, and I started to realize that my time was very limited, as you do.
For sure.
And I realized I could spend the rest of my life writing query letters trying to get this one book published, or I could use that time and write more books. And when I realized that was the option, it was a no-brainer. I had no interest in writing any more query letters. And so I stopped, and I just focused on writing the next book and the next book and the next book. And I'm not the fastest writer, and my process isn't the fastest. Some authors are able to do these things at a lightning pace that just leaves me dumbfounded. But my process works for me, and I get books out, and I'm not making millions of dollars, but I am publishing my books, and I do have readers who love them. And for me, that's plenty.
Yeah, absolutely. So beginning, just a matter of time and wanting to use your time specifically. Now, I would think that my knee-jerk reaction is, okay, so you traded in all the work of putting these query letters together and reaching out to agents, publishers, so that you could spend that time writing. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but now that you are self-publishing, you take on the role of agent, publisher, marketing department, all of that.
Yes.
And so that, I assume, comes with some time spent outside of your just traditional writing. Tell me a little bit about the process once you decided to go that self-publishing route, because I would assume if someone is listening and wants to become a published author and they decide to go the self-publishing route, they what they're looking for is tips and tricks and not shortcuts, but like, hey, I don't want to learn all of this stuff the hard way. But I would
Right.
imagine that a lot of your process now came from doing that initial work and learning the hard way. So can you talk a little bit about like what it was like, that process publishing the first book yourself
Mhm.
versus what that process looks like now that you might have maybe a little bit more of a streamlined process?
Yep. Yeah. So I didn't I didn't have a clue what I was doing back in 2011. I had a book. I actually had 4 complete manuscripts, and and I had to get them edited. And I ended up getting quite a few friends and family involved in that process because I didn't know where to find an editor. I entered King's Warrior into what Amazon had this award, annual award, and you could enter the same book as many years in a row as long as it didn't win. And so it's the Amazon Breakthrough Novel Award. And so I entered my book in that, and you got feedback from other authors. And so I got quite a bit of feedback on that first draft, second draft, third draft, et cetera, of King's Warrior, which was really helpful. A lot of those authors really helped me a lot. And then I also had friends and family who are very good at finding typos and really good at kind of giving me that like high level, this is a plot hole or this character's not acting in character. And so I started to kind of gather my people around me that could help me with things because one thing that I always tell people is, and I tell my students because I have English students, that it's very difficult to edit your own work by yourself, because when you are reading something that you wrote, your brain knows what you meant, and you miss typos, you miss duplicated words, you miss you might even miss that you have the whole sentence, like this paragraph and that paragraph start with the exact same sentence, because you're just like, well, yeah, I know what I meant. And so that it's editing is very important, and finding people that you can trust to help you edit and polish a manuscript without changing your voice is also very important.
Yeah, let's I want to go a little bit further into just the editing process that you have, because now I assume if you finish a manuscript, do you already know, oh, here's the 4 or 5 people that I'm sending this to?
Yes.
You do.
Yeah, I've
Now,
narrowed that down quite a bit.
do you have any recommendations for someone who, okay, I've written my book, who do I get to read this that will be
Right.
helpful to me? Because obviously having family members is helpful, but like we've talked about it in the past, when you were writing your first couple of books, we were getting the chance to read those at night as a family, and so we all had a chance to give feedback. And I would say some of the feedback you received was probably more constructive than others. And I would say, for example, I don't know that any of my feedback was ever very constructive. It was freely offered, but but in other words, what would you say, or what tips would you recommend for how do you find somebody that's going to read your book, but also give you something positive in terms of the feedback, or what are you looking for in an editor for the story that you want to prepare for sharing with the world?
Yeah. Well, the first thing that I would recommend is getting involved in some kind of writers group, whether it's on Discord or Facebook or in person, trying to find people who write similar things to you is helpful, just because then you can get more constructive feedback as opposed to, well, I hate fantasy, so change it. You don't want that. But if you can find a writers group, then you can generally start asking questions about things like, where do I find an editor? Who do you use as an editor? Because it can be a little bit difficult to find people who are willing to do that. If you have a friend who is really good at giving constructive feedback and is willing to read your books for free, that's great. I'm some authors will say, don't use your friends, don't use your family. I am a big proponent of, hey, if you know somebody who has that talent and that skill and they're willing to use it on your behalf, that's fantastic. You might want to get a couple of sets of eyes on it, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. I have a very good friend who was beta reading my books, and she was giving me so much advice that was just so fantastic. And I felt like every one of her comments was making me a better writer. And so I told her, you should be charging for this. And she was like, no, 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 I can't charge for that. And I was like, no, you are doing the work of an editor. This is not just beta reading. You should be charging for this. And now she runs an editing business. So,
oh, no way. Really?
So yeah, so that's kind of cool.
Very cool.
So you can find people around you who have that. And if you don't have anybody around you, I recommend getting into a writer's group of some kind where you can ask for other people. You can also, Google search at, freelance editors. Most editors will give you some kind of sample where you send them a chapter or 10 pages or something, and they will edit that sample for free, just so that you can see if they're the sort of person you can work with, if their advice or editing comments are the sorts of things that are, going with what you're trying to write, as opposed to trying to change it. Because editors don't do it on purpose, but some of them can change your voice. And so you want to find one who works well with your writing voice. But yeah.
I always thought of the editing process because I know you have used Mom and Dad for different portions of the editing process. And I remember playing baseball in college, and I was in California and Mom and Dad back in Illinois. And so I'm surrounded with college level coaches. I'm surrounded with coaches who have played professional baseball. So I have access to professional level coaching. And when I would get into a rut with my swing, there was a number of times where Dad would fly out, and the one thing that he had that the other coaches didn't have was he knew my swing, and he could tell me within 4 or 5 pitches what the issue was. Yeah. And he might be saying something that was the same thing I was being, fed by other coaches, but he was saying it in a way that I understood it. Yeah. And that got me back to my swing. And there's a lot of times, and you don't realize this, like as you're, progressing, there's a lot of times where you're getting advice from coaches where the response should be, oh, thank you for that, but not necessarily following that advice, because that advice might take you out of your game. And you don't know that necessarily as a young player. And so a lot of times you just, oh, well, he's telling me to do this, I'm going to do this. But sometimes, and like you said, not out of intent, but just because there's different styles. Anyway, so I imagine the editing process is a little bit like that, to where, maybe early on you take any advice and feedback and like, oh, I guess I got to do that. But as you grow in your writing, are there times, and how do you decide when you get feedback like, yes, I like this makes it better, or you know what, I understand what they're saying, but I'm going to continue with the route that I had planned?
Yeah, for sure. That's part of growing as a writer. And I think that's part of really owning what you're writing. And that's the ability to, one, have a thick skin, because sometimes you're going to get feedback you don't like. And sometimes that feedback is going to be useful. And sometimes that feedback is the sort of thing where you have to go, no, I do not agree with this. This isn't what I'm trying to do with the story. And as much as I love my editor, they're wrong. And that confidence, right? Like you have to have a bit of confidence about your own writing in order to do that. You also have to have gotten to a point where you trust yourself to know what's best for your story. And that's why it's really good to find an editor that you trust, because if your editor really understands you, your writing style, what you're trying to do with the story, or even if there's someone who maybe misunderstands something, but when you can write back to them and say, no, this is what I'm trying to do with this story, and this is what makes sense. And then they can go, oh, I see, that's what you meant. Maybe then tweak it this way instead. And then you get that kind of it's polished, but it's still saying what you wanted it to say. So yeah, it's a process. It takes time to, if you're just starting out, if you're just, you've got your first manuscript, you may not have that perfect relationship right away. I've got 11 books that I've published and a 12th one coming out in a couple of months. So there's been a lengthy refining process from book one to where I'm at now, and finding the people that I not only trust, but also I'm willing to pay for that service. So
For sure. Is that still a challenge when you hand it off the first time, or is it like, no, I'm eager for any feedback and understand that like there's going to come maybe criticisms, maybe different ideas, and I'm just ready for all of that, and I can just kind of stand back at a distance and dispassionately receive it all because I'm just still looking to make this thing the best I can be.
Yeah, I would say that I've gotten to a point where I have such a good rapport with my first editor, who's my developmental or content editor. The two words are synonymous. That I've gotten to a point where I just send him my rough draft. Because I used to spend a lot of time polishing and working on things before I let anybody see it. And then with the last couple of books, I realized that I was spending like, say, 12 hours editing something and making it really, really as best as I thought it could be. And then I was so excited about it. And I would send it to my developmental editor and he would send me 20 hours of work. So that's 32 hours, and these are just rough numbers. I have no idea how many hours I spend on things. Or I could send him my rough draft and he would send me 25 hours of work. So I could actually like reduce my workload. Not every developmental editor will be happy about that. So I wouldn't necessarily just start by sending a rough draft to somebody, but we have gotten to a point where it's just better for him to see my rough draft with all of its flaws and all of its problems, because he's not looking at typos. He's just looking at the story. And so there are things where it's like, there's no reason for me to polish this if I'm going to, change the whole direction of this character arc. So now that I've actually reduced my workload a little bit. Yeah.
Interesting.
And I get more. Yeah. To answer your actual question, there's a little bit there's a lot less trepidation. I don't always get answers. Like I don't always get the feedback that I want. I don't always get like, oh, this is the most brilliant thing I have ever read, but that would be nice. But I don't send it off going, oh, I hope they like it. I just
For sure. It's interesting. We had it was really fun. Had a phone conversation 2 weeks ago with Aunt Maida, and she's going through the publishing process, publishing 2 different books. It would be fun to have her on sometime because just to get the other side, because she's doing traditional publishing, but just she was talking about the length of time it is taking and how it's kind of mind blowing how long it takes to take a finished story and actually put it out there. So once you have the manuscript and you hand it off to your editors, I mean, it's, with a baseball swing, it's instantaneous. You can say, okay, I looked at it, I saw it, here's feedback. When you hand that off, like what is the timeline just in the editing process from when you give the manuscript to your editors, your beta readers? Like, are you looking for, hey, chapter at a time, or like how long is the editing process? Because I would think it would be as long as it takes, however fast your readers are reading.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, to some extent, it takes however long it takes them to read it. And if you write massive books like I do, it can take a couple months. I pay 3 separate editors. I have a developmental editor, a line editor, and then my proofreader. And that's my process. Not everybody needs every single one of those levels. Not everybody can afford to pay every single one of those levels, but that's the process that works for me. So for me, it's my developmental editor is very fast. He can usually get stuff back to me in about a month, despite the fact that I write 100 to 200,000 word books. My line editor can usually get back to me in a month or 2, and then my proofreader can get back to me in 1 to 4 months, depending on her other workload. She's got a lot of other clients. But so I have to think ahead. I have to know, okay, I'm going to be done with the book at this time in this future. This is about when I think my, editor before you is going to be done. What's your availability? That sort of thing. So sometimes there's some waiting for them to be available if they have a lot of other projects lined up. But the fastest I've ever gone from writing the first word to publishing the whole book is 1 year. And I think that's pretty fast compared to traditional publishers.
Yeah, I would think that it would be. like I said, I wanted to move on from
Yeah.
this section, but at the same time, I'm very interested. Do you have any specific stories? Maybe it'd be hard to do it without giving away spoilers for some of your books. I'm thinking the Minstrel Song series, where you handed off a manuscript, and could you give like a specific story of maybe story advice that you were given that changed either the trajectory, a character's arc, or a portion of the story where you did go back and say, yes, we're going to change something significant that might have been that little back and forth, not necessarily a battle or a struggle between you and an editor, but just like a specific story that would show what that process would look like?
Yeah. So this book, Steal Tomorrow, is an Oliver Twist retelling, sort of. And it's one where I knew I wanted to write it, and I knew I knew a couple of things I wanted to do with it in terms of changing the story of Oliver Twist, because a retelling, should change something.
Right.
And so I actually talked to our dad and asked him, what should I write? Like, these are the things I want to do. I just don't really have any ideas. And the next day he sent me an outline for a book, which was great. I loved that. I was like, this is awesome. Now I know what I need to write. So I wrote the story. So in this book, Oliver, my Oliver character, he's orphaned, and it happens in the first chapter. So that's not a spoiler. And also it's Oliver Twist, so not a spoiler. So he is on his way. He's 7 years old. His parents are taking him to the city because his mom is really sick and his dad knows of a really good doctor there. And along the way, highwaymen attack and they end up killing both of Oliver's parents and leaving him on the side of the road. And he gets kind of adopted by a gruff old wilderness man named Fritjof, who is basically taken in all of these little foundling boys and is teaching them how to live off the land. And in my the whole original rough draft, about a third of the way through the book, Fritjof dies. And so then Oliver, and there's like a really hard winter. And so the boys all go to live in town, and they're helping out around the town, and they go back to their, clearing that they live in, and it's just a mess and it's destroyed. And I was like, okay, Oliver, now you've got to go to the city, because the second part of the story was supposed to take part in the city where he meets the Artful Dodger and all these different characters. And I was like, you got to go to the city and get a job so that you can buy supplies and rebuild the clearing. And Oliver was like, and yes, my characters talked to me. He was like, I don't want to go to the city. And I was like, but you have to, because that's where the rest of the story is. And he's like, no, Fritjof taught me all this stuff and I'm really good at it. And so we can just rebuild and like make our own stuff. I know how to live off the land. I know how to hunt. He's like telling me all these things he knew how to do. I have no need to go to the city. And I was like, well, you're going. And so I wrote him going to the city, but he didn't really have a good, compelling reason to. And I knew that, but I didn't know how to get him there. And so, finished the story, all the stuff, sent it to my content editor. And he goes, this is great, except Fritjof shouldn't die. And I was like, okay. And he said, Fritjof should get really sick, and Oliver should have to go to the city and find him some medicine or a doctor. And I thought, that's perfect, because he was on his way to the city, knowing like he's got this memory from 3 years before as a child that this really great doctor lives and works in the city. That's exactly. And so with Fritjof being sick, Oliver had a reason to go to the city, and it fixed everything. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah, no, that's very cool. Very interesting I just like to hear how that process unfolds.
Yeah.
And just drafts and revisions,
yeah.
and where a story starts versus where it gets there. Because a lot of times, it's one of the reasons why we like to see behind the scenes content, because I think for Lord of the Rings, there's 1,000 hours or like 1,000,000 linear feet of film, and so you've got hours and hours and hours of stuff that gets culled and trimmed out, that are all probably great shots. They're all probably serve a story, but maybe they don't serve the story. And so it's just, I was just watching something recently where they were saying you have to be ruthless as you cut out anything that doesn't serve the story, and you have to reshape things to make sure that it's, going in the direction you want to go. And sometimes you need another set of eyes, somebody else that can maybe see something from 30,000 feet that you couldn't see in the trenches of the story that you're writing. So that's awesome. So it can be up to a year if you're moving quickly to go from here's a manuscript to, okay, we have a finished version of this story, polished, ready to go. What's the next step in the self-publishing process?
Once the manuscript is polished and ready to go, then I just need a cover, and I need to have it formatted. And we do our own formatting here in-house. My husband got Vellum, which if you're an indie author, I highly recommend that you get a MacBook or a Mac computer and get the program Vellum, because you can format your book and it will look beautiful and it will look professional, and it will take you less than half an hour the first time. After that, it'll take you about 10 minutes. I'm not even kidding. To format your whole book. Yes.
Oh, wow.
It's incredible. Now it takes Derek longer because he does these fancy little chapter graphics for me that he actually draws.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
So yeah, that the airship is his. So
really?
he makes all of those for me.
But he's drawing those in like on like an iPad or like
on his computer.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now the formatting, when you say 15 minutes to half an hour formatting, you're taking, I would assume, like a text document, like a Word document or something similar, and dropping it into you said Vellum?
Vellum, yeah.
Vellum.
Vellum. It's really fantastic.
Is it designed to, when you say formatting, what's the need and what's the purpose of formatting? What are you doing?
Yeah, so formatting is making the interior of your book look professional. Okay. And this is a step that I would say many indie authors skip, which is unfortunate. Some quite a few indie authors do their own formatting and it looks very nice. But they're like, as I read mostly only indie books now, I do start to see things where I'm like, maybe somebody should have mentioned that, or maybe that would have been better. So if you open up any book on your bookshelf, you'll notice a couple of things about the formatting if you look at it. And if you're not super observant like me, I'm not super observant. So I tend to go, I don't know. My husband is very, very extremely observant. And so he's like picking up books and he's flipping through them and this is what it's supposed to look like. So, but like where the page numbers are, the chapter and page headings. Sometimes it'll be the title of the book. Sometimes it'll be the author's name. Sometimes one page has the author name, one page has the title of the book or the chapter title if the book has chapter titles. A big one that tends to get overlooked in indie publishing is justifying your font. So that means that there's no ragged edge on the page. And so it's straight up and down on both sides.
Okay.
That's one thing that a lot of indie authors will left justify. Their text, and it just doesn't look as professional. So things like that, just like making sure that all your chapters look the same, and your chapter, like your first words, if you have like a drop cap or some kind of fancy something going on, that's what formatting is.
And what's the benefit of the program Vellum? Will that format it in a way that, okay, now I've got a file that is ready to send to print? Like yes. It'll be in the specifications necessary for the size and shape of the book that I want printed. Really?
Yeah. You can tell it what size book you're planning to publish. So I publish like 5.5 by 8.5 is the size of most of my books, but there's lots of other sizes that you could publish as, and you can pick any of those trim sizes. And it will spit out a PDF or an EPUB, or it used to do Mobi, but Mobi's not even a thing anymore. So usually PDF and EPUB is all you need, but it will make both of those simultaneously.
Gotcha.
And then you'll get 2 files and you can upload them wherever you want. Gotcha.
So a year for the editing, 15 minutes to format. So now we're to a year and 15 minutes. What's the next step in the process?